What's up, gamers? Aaron Shack here, and welcome to Shackcast episode number 24. What a new Splinter Cell game could be. We are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the first Splinter Cell game that came out in 2002, and is now 2022, having been 20 years. The first game in the series, Splinter Cell, is currently free on Ubisoft Connect, so make sure you pick that up. You can download the app on PC, and you can redeem the game for free. Just make an account, log in, download one of the best stealth games in existence for free. Now, I'm going to let you know I do have a couple video assets that are playing in this particular Shackcast. So we will have... on the right side, some concept art from the Splinter Cell remake, and then on the left side, I'm showcasing a little bit of my gameplay of the first Splinter Cell game as I navigated, I believe, the first level here. Just to kind of, build up some nostalgia here while we're talking about the game. I wanted to have some video assets running in the background. But thank you to all of our listeners and viewers, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit at first about the original Splinter Cell game that came out in 2002 and what it means to me, because it is literally between several other franchises. Splinter Cell is one of my favorite of all time. Like, when people ask me what my favorite games are, I say Tom Clancy Splinter Cell, Alan Wake, Max Payne, the Batman Arkham games, and they all kind of have this, or most of them kind of have this thread in common, that there's often a stealth element, or there's like a character with a really, like just a voice that you just can't forget. You hear Michael Ironside as Sam Fisher, you hear Kevin Conroy as Batman, you hear James McCaffrey as Max Payne. It's really hard to forget some of these iconic voices from a lot of these games. And also, yeah, there is kind of a stealth game trend that runs through all these titles, and maybe I am kind of a stealth gamer at heart as well. I definitely enjoyed those action adventure third-person shooters, and I love being able to sneak around. And so I remember when Splinter Cell came out, or actually before it came out, official Xbox Magazine had a demo disc, and I had that before I had any games. And the demo disc had Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell. And so I had already played Max Payne on other people's Xboxes. And that was shortly going to be my first game that I would get on my Xbox. And then I would get Splinter Cell almost immediately. But I wore out that dang demo disc. I mean, I played the heck out of it. And I was just blown away by, as you can see on screen here, the lighting, the animations, the way that Sam Fisher moves, the way he interacts with the environment. There just wasn't a game at all that had animations that were this clean and special. And the way that he sneaks around, the way his legs move, the way you can just barely push forward on the stick, and it's like he's tiptoeing like a ninja, and he just has this fine-tuned movement, because we remember Sam Fisher's he's not James Bond, he's not like a secret agent, he's a special operative, an ex-Navy SEAL, he's someone with a lot of skill in tactical operations. He's the person you bring in when you need something done quiet, undetected. He's not a straight-up killer. He's not a murderer. I mean, but, when objectives or situations call for it, he can definitely do what needs to be done, no matter what that is. But he's really trained to just be a ghost. If there's data to recover somewhere, if a plane crashes and there's a black box that we need to recover because it has sensitive data on it, then you send in Sam Fisher to recover that and get out of there without a trace. And so I don't know. Sam Fisher is just a very unique character to begin with. So one of the best lighting systems at the time, like genre defining, and this was an Xbox exclusive at the time. It later became accessible on multiple platforms, which I think was really good for the franchise. But I mean, this was like one of the games that sold me on, after I had my GameCube, I was like, oh, what do I want next? Like an Xbox or a PlayStation 2? And it was like, at the time, PlayStation 2 had GTA 3, and that was like the big seller for me there. But for Xbox, I was like, oh, dude, Max Payne and Splinter Cell. Those are my jams. And those became like the games that I would just come back to time and time again as the years went by. So, cutting edge graphics for its time, the best lighting and shadows on the marketplace, the animations that were so smooth, whether Sam was jogging, walking, just kind of crouch walking and tiptoeing about. It also had dynamic lighting, which at the time, a lot of games would sort of just hand paint the environments, and you would have the lighting baked into the game, since the time of day in a lot of games would not change unless you went to a different level. You'd be like, oh, this is the nighttime level, or oh, this is the daytime level, or this is the level that's at dusk, or whatever. Like this one would have dynamic lighting, so that way, if you did want to have time of day shift, although most of the missions seemed, some in the franchise were at different times of day, but a lot of the time Sam Fisher operates at night. He's kind of like Batman. He's wearing a black suit. He wants to blend in the darkness. He's got the night vision goggles, the thermal option as well, and then later games he gets like sonar and different stuff that he can utilize. So beyond that, another thing that people really enjoyed was shooting out the lights. Pretty much everyone that's played one of these older Splinter Cell games probably remembers going down hallways and in different rooms and shooting out the lights so that you could have the advantage, so that you would use darkness as your ally and you would hide in the shadows and creep around, and you could be in the same room in the police station map, for example. You could be in the same room with a bunch of these police officers, and they're all typing at their desks, and you're just sneaking around the shadows behind them, and they have no idea that there's this guy in the room with them. And them sneaking around, hacking computers, picking locks to get indoors and stuff like that. And the hacking and lockpicking puzzles were really good. Like they were really dope. You had keypads that you could look at with your thermal goggles. You could switch on to the thermal mode, and you could see the fingerprints of what keys were pressed. And so you could try to figure out, okay, it looks like this was the last key they pressed. This one was pressed a lot, so maybe that number's used twice, stuff like that. So it was really cool that you could figure out stuff like that. Also, it had, you could break glass in the game, which was really unique. Glass would shatter. You'd have to worry about stepping on the shards of glass or any other obstacles that were on the ground. There was just really advanced sound in the game, as well as lighting and visuals and animations and gameplay and stuff like that. The sound had to be on point because your whole goal was to be silent. So if you stepped on a piece of glass, you would just hear it start to crack, and guards would be like, huh? And there was a training room that had you go in, and there was shards of glass, and there was like, I don't know, it was like wet paint or something on the ground. You went into this room that's completely soundproof with audio mics hanging from the ceiling, and Lambert is testing Sam. He's like, you need to get through this room without making a sound. And so you can either move so slowly or dexterously, because there were also chains hanging from the ceiling. If you made one single sound, Lambert would be on your case, and you'd have to redo the training sequence. So that was really cool. Light and sound were just paramount in these older games. And you even had meters to let you know if you were completely covered in darkness. Later on in the series, they would kind of shift the camera to looking black and white whenever you were in the shadows. I wasn't super crazy about that, but it is a good way to sort of simulate darkness and your eyes adjusting to darkness, which is kind of what Sam does. He spends so much time in the dark, his eyes probably get really used to seeing objects and people and interacting with things in the darkness. He's probably really skilled at that. Let's see. Also, the game had lots of stunning settings. Just tons of places that you would go and visit all over the world. You had missions all over the place, and it made the game really exciting. It gave you this massive adventure that you could enjoy. And I think that's something you would probably want to see. And then, of course, sort of speaking about Splinter Cell and how it grew over time, with Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow, the second game in the series, the Spies versus Mercenaries mode became a thing. And the Spies was typical Splinter Cell gameplay in third person. The Mercenaries were your kind of first person, shotgun or assault rifle type weapon, and you had a flashlight and you had to guard the objectives. Whereas the Spies were trying to get in and like hack things or something like that, and you could sneak up behind the guards and grab them. And then you could turn on voice chat and you could like talk to the person that you've grabbed. And I remember when I did that in an Xbox Live match, it was just the dopest moment when I was like, night, and just took him out. It was really cool. And so, I don't know, I hope that they come up with like a fun way to bring Spies versus Mercs back. Because it's kind of a game mode that was fully unique. And it really had the odds against you too. Because the guards, the mercenaries were heavily armed, and the Spies, you just had to be sneaky, and you had to set up distractions and stuff like that. You had to outsmart real players, which is a whole different type of strategy. Talking about Sam Fisher, he's kind of an older guy. Like, I think when they got him, like, he has a little bit of gray here, so he's probably in his 40s or 50s or something. He's definitely an older spy, and they had Michael Ironside voicing him, and he has this really deep bass voice. And then he has his young daughter, Sarah, and that sort of becomes the emotional tether of, like, she never knows where he is, but he's always out there fighting for not just America, but often for the betterment of the world, because there's often terrorists, and he's trying to prevent wars from happening. He's participating essentially in information warfare, which is something that was really for Tom Clancy to be thinking about stuff like this, and even Kojima in the Metal Gear Solid games. For them to be thinking about this was really the forefront of the early 2000s, was like realizing that wars were not necessarily always going to be just guns and grenades and tanks and stuff, but that information and the battle for it, and the battle against what's true and what's not, and just preventing war by securing information and keeping data safe. That's crazy. It's such a wild concept. And for the time period, for 2002, the gadgets you were using, the weaponry, the technology that Sam has access to, this was all near future stuff that DARPA and the CIA and all this other NSA and whatnot were working on. And so Tom Clancy is just sort of putting forward, and that was what was so exciting about the newer Tom Clancy franchises at the time. As he was coming out with newer things, you had Rainbow Six, and then you had Splinter Cell and Ghost Recon, stuff like that. And as he was coming up with all these different ideas, it was all based on reality and near future technology, and how the world would react in different situations and different tensions with these different people with their different weapons, gadgets that they have. It was really cool. And so I look forward to getting some hands-on time with the SC20K, seeing if they, keep the sticky cams and the sticky shocker and the pistol and just all the cool gadgets that we got to utilize. And, of course, all the hacking puzzles and the lock picking, and, just finding ways to make sure that all that stuff is still fun. I know some of that, in 20 years, we probably have more exciting ways to do some of these puzzles, and that's another thing that they're probably considering. And Sam is also kind of witty and charming, and he has something called the fifth freedom, which sort of supersedes all other freedoms. And they talk about it heavily in the first game. Is that pretty much to do whatever he has to do. He has the freedom to do whatever means necessary. And so they would let him know during certain missions. They'd be like, oh, okay, you need to like not kill anyone here. No alarms, all that kind of stuff. But then at a certain point, there might be a certain, something happens or whatever, and they just say, Sam, you got the fifth freedom. You know what's going on the ground. Your boots on the ground. We know and trust your decision making to not turn this into an international incident, which is usually why he's in most of the situations he's in, is he's trying to avoid something like truly crazy from happening. Whether it's like nuclear warfare and stuff like that, he's like trying to avoid sane things from happening. Also, I don't know if it's too much of an ask, but like Lambert and Grimsdottir had several voice actors. Don Jordan and Dennis Haysbert did Lambert, and I think we know Dennis from 24, from the insurance commercials as well. And then Grimsdottir had several actresses portraying her. Claudia Besso in Splinter Cell, Chaos Theory, and a couple others. Adriana Anderson in Pandora Tomorrow, and Kate Drummond in Blacklist. They were just, I think they've always done a good job of trying to find people with similar voices, but I mean, I think if you don't have Ironside, you don't have Splinter Cell. And that's just what it is. You won't have Sam Fisher. We've already seen a Splinter Cell game without Ironside, and I still enjoyed Blacklist, but it just isn't the same. It didn't even feel like it was him. We should have just played a different character for that whole game. Moving on from that, the game had a really good interrogation system. It was as simple as just walking up behind someone, pressing A to grab them, and then you could have a conversation with them, you could threaten them, and then you could choose whether to knock them out, or in later games when you had the knife, you could kill them. But Sam had like really interesting interrogations, and they weren't always threatening. There weren't, it wasn't like, tell me or I'm going to kill you. Like, he just sort of had a way of psychologically messing with these people, whether they were security guards or special forces. He could find a way to get the information that he needs out of them. So that was really cool. It was really unique, and I always compared it to Metal Gear Solid, where you had to like hold someone up, you had to like walk up behind them, you had to hold like 3 buttons, first person mode, aim your gun, and then you had to like not let go of the button, otherwise you'd fire the gun. So you're like playing this like twister game of holding all these different buttons, whereas Splinter Cell is just like, just press A and grab the guy and just get it over with. But with Metal Gear, it's like you got to hold them up, you sit there, and then you got to move around in front of them sometimes, and you point the gun at different parts of them, and then they'll shake and drop their dog tags or weapons or ammo, whatever they might have for you. And so I really thought that was well done. Of course, the lethal and non-lethal attacks that came later, the Krav Maga moves that came later, were just really good things that were added to the franchise that made sense. And me having read all the Splinter Cell books, they talk extensively about his Krav Maga training and about how he hides and how he can sleep anywhere. He has a suit that regulates his body temperature, just all these different things. And he talks about how he sleeps in a ventilation system. He just sleeps inside an air vent all night long until it's time for him to do what he has to do. And just his different ways of insertion, extraction from different. So, getting in now to the remake. We've got some details about the remake. It's going to be in the Snowdrop engine. It's going to have ray-traced global illumination. So we kind of talked about this. You're going to have light transference, where light can bounce off of objects. You can have deep, dark shadows, and then you can have rooms that are, a room that's lit by an adjacent room. Maybe the light is coming through the doorway of another room and shining into the hallway, which is pitch black, but you're still getting that transference of light from another room that's partially illuminating the hallway just a little bit. And so we get those subtle bits of lighting that really, to me, was first noticeable in Remedy's Control. That game in 2019 really had incredible lighting, so that even in these rooms that were dark, you just had the transference of light from other rooms, bouncing off of walls and such, or shining through windows or whatever it may be. We're also going to see some advanced audio simulation. They will have, surfaces and objects that can absorb sound or bounce it off onto other objects, so that, maybe you could hear a guard across a large room and it would sort of echo, or down a long hallway or whatever it might be, or if, depending on the maybe even the materials of what the room is made out of, certain things absorb sound, certain things allow sound to bounce around. So yeah, they did mention audio and visual updates coming to the game. Compelling and detailed settings. So once again, they're wanting to make sure that not only, as you can see in these images here, do they preserve some of the original environments that we visited in the game back in 2002 are preserved, but they want to make sure that they're exciting and that they're awesome, and that they're places you want to be, like really exciting and detailed. The next thing, they want to talk about their Special Forces AI and how they're going to be offering more depth to the game, because the Special Forces essentially will breach or enter rooms differently than like regular soldiers or an average security guard, right? They're wanting to use all the new technology at their disposal, all the file storage space that they're going to have for this game, to be able to have advanced lighting and audio and animations and movement and AI and stuff like that. So one of the things that we're talking about is like, an average security guard is gonna turn the handle and open the door, or maybe he'll kick it open. But whereas a Special Forces team might, they might open the door, throw in a flashbang or something, and then have guards breaching from multiple sides and different angles and stuff like that, exceedingly tactical, right? So you get a different experience based on whatever kind of guards you're working with. Whereas, some of the older games were kind of just guards that just kind of all behaved the same. They all just kind of walked around with their gun until they saw you. And if you were in the darkness and not making too much noise, then you kind of had an advantage. But if they took, as you can see in this video here, but yeah, they can see you if you make yourself obvious here. This was a very tense situation. 3 guards, and I grabbed one, and then the other 2 are patrolling down these narrow alleyways, and I'm just moving my pistol between the 2, and I'm just like, who am I gonna have to shoot first? And I was like, I opted not to shoot anyone because obviously that would raise an alarm. So then I came over here and just like knocked one guard out, and then now I have the option to sort of pursue the other 2. Okay, so the other thing about the original Splinter Cell is a lot of the levels had, there were some levels that were like 1 alarm and you're done. There were some that were 3 alarms and you're done. There's usually at least one mission in pretty much every Splinter Cell where it's like they give you the extreme stealth experience. They're like, no, you need to do this perfect. And it was kind of punishing back then, and I get that like pushes people away from hardcore stealth games like this. They're really simulation. But yeah, they did say that they're going to sort of adapt the way the game plays, that they're not really going to have the instant game overs. They're not going to have the like 3 alarms and you fail. But they did mention that they do kind of like the idea of like, the first alarm, the guards put on body armor. The second one, they put on helmets. Like, things get excessive. And that they wanted to give you the tools to be able to like diffuse the situation. On top of that, they did say that this is not simply a remaster. They're not upscaling anything. This is a completely fresh and a new foundation for the franchise moving forward. This is taking the entire thing apart and building something brand new. And these are people that grew up playing this game and loving this game. So the people at Ubisoft Toronto seem to have a real respect for the source material here, and they're definitely looking at like what they can improve from the original game, and then what DNA needs to say there. And so I think really this first level of the game is just, it's a really good showcase for what Splinter Cell was like. And even that roll that you could do, I think it was like you hold B while moving forward, and you could do like a forward tactical roll. That was such a cool animation, such a sneaky tool to have in your arsenal there. But yeah, they did mention that the core story and experience will remain the same, but they did say that there would be some changes. I guess they were saying like some things didn't age well, and I wasn't fully able to understand what that meant, but I know in 2002 the game was about sort of, it was information warfare, and a lot of it involved sort of a Georgian president that was sort of behaving very Saddam Hussein type kind of guy, and you had these missions where you're sneaking around in Georgia, the country, at some point to defuse this. So I don't know. It's potentially certain things like that could be tweaked, and maybe they change what countries we're sneaking around in or whatever it might be. I don't know. And they did say they made reference to a lot of the Splinter Cell games and things that they liked, and so there was a lot of references to the original. There was a lot of references to Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, and talking about like the bank mission and how open-ended that mission was. There's just like Sam could go in the front doors, or you could like find that path where you sneak upstairs to the roof, and you open the ceiling, the glass skylight, and you rappel down in the middle of this bank, and there's like lasers, and it's like a Mission Impossible thing. There's all these lasers that can detect you, and Sam just rappels in from the ceiling, and you get to like hack the computers and stuff like that, and sneak around from the bank guards, and just how open-ended the series started to get over time. From the lighthouse level that opened up Chaos Theory, to just future games that got even bigger, had you exploring the White House and other famous locations. And one of the big things about the original Splinter Cell was the mission where you break into the CIA. That to me was such a wild thing for the NSA to be breaking into the CIA, because there was a mole that was in the CIA, and Sam needed to find out who it was. And you could really just ask. You couldn't just go in and have a tour. You had to like sneak into one of the most secure buildings in America and like get the information you need, and also not kill people, because those are your fellow Americans, right? The other exciting thing is that there is an animated Splinter Cell series coming to Netflix. There was a Splinter Cell VR title, but I believe that was canceled. And I think that's for the best, because it just wasn't what we wanted. The thing we've wanted, 2013 was the last Splinter Cell game, and that was Splinter Cell Blacklist. The servers just went down this year for co-op. So you can't actually play that with friends anymore. And so we really don't have an experience like that. So I don't know if this new Splinter Cell is just going to be, just a perfect remake of a single-player campaign, or if we will get some multiplayer or some co-op missions that we can play together, something with some replayability. But we've seen Sam show up in Ghost Recon Wildlands and Breakpoint as a character there as Michael Ironside. We've seen Sam show up as Zero in Rainbow Six Siege, and you're able to play as him there. I mean, we've seen him kind of just make all these cameos, and we saw his night vision goggles in The Division, just sort of implying that Sam's still out there doing something. So we've seen all that, and all this time, we haven't been begging for a VR game. We've been begging for a mainline Splinter Cell entry with Michael Ironside and not caving to loot boxes and season passes and battle passes and not turning it into something it's not, it can be action oriented like Conviction and Blacklist, but it does need to have that core stealth to it as well. And that's where it becomes a really successful thing. And so hopefully we can sort of please everybody from all angles here, because I do know that there's a lot of people that are not into stealth games. They're not into hardcore stealth experiences. But Splinter Cell is one of the best out there, and I know this is a tough market to crack, and I think that's why they've been reluctant about making new games, is that just the stealth market is just, it's a very niche genre. Whereas, things like Ghost Recon and tactical shooters and stuff like that, you have a clear market. You can make that an open world game, whereas like Splinter Cell, I'm not sure it works quite as well as an open world title, but I wouldn't close the door on the possibility that could work, that you could simulate the spy experience of infiltration, extraction, and recon, and all that kind of stuff. But you never want to lose the basis of what makes the series great. And so I'm really excited. And some of this concept art that we've seen over here looks really dope. And even just sort of reminiscing over my gameplay here, I've done a full series playthrough of the entire Splinter Cell series here on the YouTube channel. And the one thing I want to go back to is that Double Agent had two different entries. There was one, the original Xbox, which played more like the older Splinter Cell games, and then there was Double Agent on next gen, which was like Xbox 360 and forward, and that one played vastly differently. That was brand new, and that was the one we played on the channel. So I want to go back and play the original Xbox version of Double Agent. I guess that would truly complete our series playthrough if we hit all the crazy side spin-off adventures like that, where it's just like a totally different game. I mean, in terms of gameplay. So once again, I want to thank you for listening and watching, depending where you are. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, episode 24 of the Shackcast. What a new Splinter Cell game could be. The possibilities are exciting, and I've stated my case, and I'm excited for the future. All things Splinter Cell, I can't wait to get my hands on this. It's one of my favorite franchises of all time. So, thank you for watching, listening. Take care, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.